Customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DiJulius. Today, our Chief Revolution Officer of the DiJulius Group, John DiJulius, talks with Dave Murray, Senior Customer Experience Consultant for the DiJulius Group, about how to build a zero-risk organization. In this episode, you'll discover what it means for an organization to be zero risk, how to determine the most common places your company drops the ball, how to create systems and processes to reduce those things from happening, how to build service recovery processes to handle when they still do happen, how you can turn a customer who had something wrong happen into a customer for life, and how being zero risk dramatically increases employee morale. Now here's your host, John DiJulius.
Hello, revolutionaries. This is John DiJulius, Chief Revolution Officer of the DiJulius Group, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. And today I am joined with the one and only Dave Murray, Senior Customer Experience Consultant with the DiJulius Group. Welcome, Murray.
Hello, John. It's great to see you today, and I'm excited to be here, especially to talk about one of my favorite topics, zero risk.
Yes, zero risk, which is the seventh commandment of our 10 commandment methodology. And this is episode 44, which is a big number. Dave, what do you think of when I say 44 to you?
You know, it's almost a whole year. We're getting there.
Yeah. Well, I think of Hank Aaron. I'm just trying to think of some big 44s.
Yeah.
Wasn't that? That's a running back's number. Leroy Kelly?
I think so.
I don't think anyone's going to know who that is that listens to us. John Riggins with the Redskins. That still is too dated. Other 44s. But I am excited because zero risk, like you, is one of my favorite commandments. I probably say that with all of them, but I really enjoy this. Tell us a little bit about zero risk.
Well, here's the thing about zero risk that I feel is so important. A lot of what we do in our consulting practice, most organizations don't do, right? They don't think about those things. They don't train on those things. Zero risk is really one of those, right? Zero risk is all about making sure that your team members are prepared and confident to handle any sort of interaction when things don't go well, whether it's us dropping the ball, whether it's a customer not being happy, maybe it doesn't even have anything to do with us, but just being ready and being confident. And one of the reasons it's so valuable is very few organizations have any training on that. As a matter of fact, most times that an employee has to deal with a zero risk happening is usually live with the customer, right? It's on the job training. And so it's really all about making sure that your team members understand what are those things that can go wrong, and probably more importantly, that they're prepared to pick up that ball and run with it.
Dave, you bring up a great point, because if you're, customer experience focused, and I'm sure you are, you wouldn't be listening. Even when I started my first business nearly 30 years ago, the John Roberts Spa, the first things we would do is make sure at every touch point in the journey that we were really hopefully exceeding their expectations or being more consistent. But the one thing that really hit me like a ton of bricks is every week we'd have something go wrong. And, every week we book 4,000 appointments a week. So if we're 99% accurate, which I'm sure we're not, that means, we screw up 30 to 40 appointments a week. And, we're human. So someone walks in every week and not be down for the time, location, hairdresser they think they are. And what used to always happen is they'd walk in, they'd say, "Hi, I'm here for my 3 o'clock with Sandy." And the hostess would look at him and say, "No, you're not. We don't have you down. We had you yesterday. You're at, a different location." And it was always like so shocking to me that we know this is going to happen. Even when, on our best week, it's going to happen. Less, but it's still going to happen. Why do we act like a deer in headlights when it happens? So that's kind of, was my, and it was not the employee's fault, it was ours, that we didn't train both on how to prevent or reduce it from happening. What is the system that would, help us reduce it? But just as important and more importantly, how do we recover when it does happen?
Yeah, absolutely, John. And when you think about it, what's so valuable about zero risk is it's really all about customer retention. And when we're out there talking with our client base, customer retention is a huge thing right now. Organizations understand how important it is to maintain their customer base as opposed to being out there and advertising and trying to get new ones. I mean, the reality is repeat customers spend more than new customers. Repeat customers typically give higher satisfaction scores, and repeat customers are also going to refer more new business than a new customer is. So there's so much value in focusing on making sure you have these protocols in place that are going to help you retain your existing customer base.
Yeah, and Dave, there's so many studies that confirm exactly what you just said, that it basically takes, you have to, acquire 5 new customers in the typical business to, produce what a repeat customer is going to do for you, right? New customers are trial customers. They aren't sure. They have no emotional connection. Another thing is repeat customers are more forgiving, right? They know you. They're like, "Oh, it's Murray, I know you didn't mean for that to happen. Don't worry about it, But it said a 5% increase in customer retention can increase a company's profitability by 75%. I mean, that is so shocking that, all we do in the business world is we're looking for the next customer and how we can market and how we can get new customers. But we have so many going out the back door. So I think this is where zero risk really plays a major role.
Yeah. And one other thing I'll add to that too, John, is companies need to remember, you brought up the fact of loyalty, and customers can be more loyal to us. There's really no better time to build that loyalty than we have the opportunity to fix something, right? When we have the opportunity to fix where we drop the ball and really earn that customer's loyalty. If you handle situation properly, you could literally earn a customer for life. So it's so important to have those in place. And so zero risk, the way we define it, it's really all about anticipating your service defects. So making sure that your teams understand what can and will go wrong. Sometimes they're at our own hands. We make a mistake, we drop the ball. Sometimes they're a little more out of our control. But it's understanding what those defects are and then having protocols in place to make it right. So making sure your teams understand how to pick that ball up and run with it and make sure that they make that customer happy.
Yeah. And to your earlier point, we're going to give examples. So many times you win your customer over for life when you drop the ball and fix it than if nothing had go wrong in the first place. Because, so yeah. What does zero risk not mean? Hey, Dave, this is funny. I think we both have had this where we go into a company, they hire us to, one of the workshops and phases is to help them create zero risk service recovery. And sometimes, a quarter of the way through the class, some people in the workshop are confused and they were expecting zero risk to mean something totally different. Do you get that?
Oh, all the time. There's a lot of misinterpretation of what it's all about because, we as organizations are very often cynical, right? We're cynical of our customers. We write so many policies around the fact that somebody's going to try and take advantage of us somewhere. So that can carry over into this. And so a lot of times people come thinking that being zero risk is meant to protect us from customers and taking advantage of us. And that's not what it is at all, right? Again, we're going to talk about it later in our program today, but it's really about giving our customers the benefit of the doubt and not expecting the worst, knowing that it's going to happen from time to time, but that's not what this is all about. And the other misinterpretation that's out there quite a bit is that if you go through this process, that you as an organization will never drop the ball again, right? It's going to happen. There is a human element. There will always be a human element. We're going to make mistakes as an organization. The difference is you'll be training your teams on how to handle it, on what to do when that does happen again, as well as building awareness that these things even do happen. Because a lot of times our team members aren't aware that these potholes can pop up and they fall right into them. Yeah,
I love that. So what zero risk does mean is, look at how easy we are, your business is to do business with, what areas we drop the ball, and how can we reduce those so we're not dropping the ball as often, and then service avoidance, which is that. Then when we do still drop the ball, like you said, if we take it from 8% of the time to 3%, that is a major victory. But don't forget that it's still happening 3% of the time. And that's relative based on the number of customers you interact with per day. So that's where we create world-class recovery and protocols, better communication with customers, even tracking customer challenges. There's a lot of things that zero risk covers. We're not going to be able to cover all that today, but you can certainly find that in our books and, working with us. This is all the things that what a zero risk company is. So, when I think of zero risk, I think of Nordstrom's because I like shopping at Nordstrom's, but one of the things I really like shopping at Nordstrom's about was I never had to worry if something didn't fit. I never saved receipts or, you start panicking. Oh my God, like how long ago did I buy this? Was it over 30 days? And, I'm gonna have to go in and I don't have a receipt and I may have to see the general manager, all this stress. Nordstrom's doesn't care. They'll take it back in a year. Zappos, they have no return policy. They'll take it back. They've taken back, shoes that have been worn. And this isn't meant to, let clients, customers take advantage of you. You always have a filter, a screen for those 2%. But the biggest thing is don't punish 98% of the customers for what 2% may do. So one of my favorite zero risks is Starbucks. They have them on their cups sometimes. They've had them signage, where you wait to get your drink, and it says, "Our barista promise. Love your beverage or let us know. We'll always make it right." I love that because they are encouraging you to say, "Excuse me," and they make it really easy to, say, "This wasn't what I asked for." And I really like that. Do you have any zero risk companies, Dave, that you have enjoyed doing business with?
Yeah, a lot come to mind, but one in particular that I loved where they went with zero risk was the Maids International. We were working back with them. And not only did they identify a lot of places where they dropped the ball and how they could be better, but they also helped their team members evaluate the severity of the situation, right? So is this a situation where I just need to let this customer vent, hear them out, be supportive? Or is this one where I really need to get the manager involved and really make those decisions so that they were handling these consistently? And it's just one of those things that, unfortunately, for us as consumers, a lot of organizations make assumptions that their team members know what to do, and those assumptions are usually wrong, right? As companies, we need to provide our teams with this training.
So just think about the typical customer challenge that we experience as consumers, and then we got to think back, is that happening to us? So companies aren't easy to do business with. When you have a challenge, they start asking you a bunch of questions like poking holes that you might be trying to get away. They overshare. They tell you why something isn't working behind the scenes, which really doesn't matter to me. All I know is I didn't get my product service when I expected, and I just want to know, when or how. They place blame. It's not our fault. you should have, or someone else should have, or our distributor didn't. Many steps, extremely difficult. Got to call back, got to, wait, can't, the person we're dealing with doesn't have the clearance above their pay grade to, make it right. Company hides behind policy, which is a 4-letter word to us. Don't use that word, policy, or you didn't read the small print, or employees can never go against policy, even when it's clearly warranted. So, those are a lot of examples that we have to try to make sure we avoid when we're transforming our businesses to be a zero risk company.
Yeah. And, one that you brought up earlier too, John, and it kind of goes back to organizations making assumptions that our team members know what to do without the training. But, just saying no, right? I mean, there's so many times where we may just tell a customer no because we don't know another option. So are you arming your team members with those options so they know what those options are? And we'll talk about that a little later in today's broadcast as well. But, it also comes down to one of the things that we talk about all the time, John. It's almost like every episode this comes up, and that's service aptitude, right? So we talk about service aptitude, and it's something that you have to give to your team members. You can't assume that they have high service aptitude. As a matter of fact, assume they have low service aptitude based on where they worked in previous life experiences. And so you have to ask yourself this: do you trust your customers? Do your team members trust your customers? And unless that's part of your service aptitude, chances are they don't, right? Chances are they worked somewhere before where trusting customers was not a thing, right? They just assumed the customer was lying, trying to get away with something. So you really need to make sure that you're preaching to your team members that we do trust our customers, that we are making charitable assumptions. We're giving our customers the benefit of the doubt, but also know where to draw the line, right? Know where a customer may be trying to get away with something. But as you brought up before, John, that's the minority. That's not the majority. However, most organizations treat all of us as consumers like the minority that we're trying to get away with something. And that's something that can really differentiate your organization from your competitors if you're focused on those charitable assumptions.
And you're right. People do ask, where do you draw the line? I say, I don't. Yes, you might have someone is chronic, and maybe you have to go in a different direction with that customer, right? But we don't want to make that the example. And, it is such a small minority in most businesses. I remember in a lot of examples, people say, well, listen, you're talking about giving someone a free coffee or, French fries with their, no, listen, you remember this 8 or 9 years ago, we had signed a big consulting client, and our first quarter we had worked with them, and it was a couple-year contract. And I remember we sent the invoice, and the invoice was $150,000. I mean, that's a lot of money to any company, especially us at the DiJulius Group. And on one of our calls or our on-sites, they weren't happy with the progress. They took total blame. The original project lead, I think they had to let go, wasn't doing the job. So nothing really gained any traction. It was almost, a waste of the first 90 days. Not the way you want to start off a big project like that. So I remember we got the check, and I told, our accounts receivable person to send them, $30,000 back. And I know you were a little concerned, and everyone thought, hey, listen, that's not, that's not our fault. They're saying they didn't put the right person in the position. And I, said, listen, good faith. This is a long-term commitment, and put it in escrow if you want. But we have to help make this a success. We'll always take some responsibility. And the CEO was, I think, shocked and pleasantly surprised. And in the end, he paid us everything, including that $30,000 that we sent back, because we crushed it. And I think, it's been 8 or 9 years, and we're still working with that same company. So, where do you draw the line? A lot of times I say, now, If it was someone who had always complained, always asking for money back because they were never happy, no, I probably wouldn't have made that decision. A lot of times you look at who you're dealing with, and if they're not someone that has ever complained before, I wouldn't treat them as such.
Yeah, great example, John. And it just goes to show that it can be case by case, and you have to make those decisions. But again, those charitable assumptions are so important, assuming that, they're not happy for a legitimate reason, not just trying to get away with something. And, one of the other things that we really focus on when it comes to the Zero Risk Workshop is we ask organizations a simple question, and that is, how easy are you to work with? How easy are you to do business with? And, on the surface, a lot of times that answer is, we're very easy, right? We do everything we can to make it easy. But when they really do an audit, when they really go back and look at how customers are contacting them, how easy is it to complain, which is another topic we'll be talking about in today's session, all those things, a lot of times it's not as easy as they think. And so that's a really worthwhile place to start and ask yourself that question. What are the communication channels? Is it easy for a customer to find those? Is it easy for a customer to find a manager or to get a hold of whomever? And ask those questions and really, really focus on the answers, because it's a great place to start. Because if you think about it, when we're looking at zero risk, if your customers are having a hard time contacting you, a hard time getting your product, a hard time asking their questions, well, then, of course, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Of course, they're coming to us angrier than they would be otherwise. And that's really just setting your teams up for that failure.
Yeah. And this is common sense, but we don't do it enough, I think, as leaders. Be a customer, call up, send an email, get online and try to talk to your website attendant, order something. And, there's been times where I've cringed because I knew I had to call the call center, and, I knew it isn't an easy experience, which, that's saying something when, you don't even want to call your own business. So you have to address it. You have to see. So many times you'll ask, why do we do it that way? Because it's easier for us.
Right.
Well, it's not easier for the client, So you answer the phone and you ask me my information. And I give you my account number, I give you my passcode, and then you say, I have to transfer you. And then the next person does that. And then maybe a third person. It's like, why is can't you confirm? And then, anyone else I speak to say they've been, vetted. It is who they say they are. I appreciate the security, but, I just think, the one of my favorite lines is build your company's customer experience as if no customers had bad intentions. Don't build it the opposite way. And, we spent so much time on an earlier podcast talking about negative cues and the negative cues verbally, signage, physically, and the threats and all those things. And you're really good at looking at a company from their website to walking around the business to all their signs and what employees are doing. Everything speaks. And a lot of times you don't need to say, hey, if you bounce a check, you're going to get charged for, or whatever that may be. But sometimes you do need it said, but it could be said in a more positive way. We always go back. I always go back to the travel centers of America when we were working with their truck repair service. They had a sign that outside the lobby where the truck drivers waited. And there was a sign going into the bay where the truck was being repaired. And it said, no truck drivers allowed past this door. And, that didn't sound right? They might need something from their cab or, why? Why can't I go and check on the work of my cab? Well, it was an insurance. Insurance didn't cover if they got hurt in the Bay Area because there's obviously, it's a dangerous area for non-technicians. But just rewording and saying, you had to say it, but say, for your protection, for the protection of our drivers, our customers, should you need anything from your truck or cab, please let us know and we'd be happy to get it for you or escort you there. Same thing, but it's not a threat. It's not a policy.
Yeah. And John, it's so important for both negative cues or if you're doing an audit on how easy are you to conduct business with, it's so important to be purposely looking at things through a customer's lens, as you brought up. You're typically not your customer. Your team members aren't always your customers. So making sure that they're looking at things through that customer's lens as their typical versus their typical team member lens, because it is such a different view.
Yeah. So where do you start with all this? And that's it. Is first, you examine how easy you are to do business with, and at every touch point, every channel, and making sure that you didn't build a bunch of policy to make it easier for the company and harder for the customer. But then the next thing you do in building a zero risk company is you look at the most common areas you drop the ball. And while it at first this is daunting, because it's like, oh my God, well, we dropped the ball dozens and dozens of different ways. I mean, last week we had this, and next week, and a month ago, and those are. But as you know, Dave, with your work as a consultant, all of them, when you list them out, they all fall into maybe 4 to 6 buckets, if you will. So we look at John Roberts Spa. That's a salon experience, spa experience. Everyone knows that. The 5 ways that 99.9% of our problems fall into these 5 buckets. Appointments, meaning it's not for the time that the customer is expecting. We're just not on the same page, whatever that means. The second one is delay. We're either running late before we get to you, or Tracy Murray thought she'd be out of here by 3, and it's now 3:45, and we're still working with her, and she had to get home and get a kid off a bus. Number 3 is the quality of work. You just the customer just doesn't like what they left with, be it the hair, the makeup, the color, whatever it may be. Number 4 is price, and that is a miscommunication of price. Our menu says, $65 and up, $150 and up, and so when we sat down with someone, we didn't communicate that what the up was going to be, if it was going to be. So they may get up, they're expecting to pay 65 and it's 85. And then the 5th bucket is professionalism. And you didn't like how someone handled the situation. They had a bad attitude. They weren't present. They, all the things, they were just unprofessional. Their customer service wasn't good. So when you really look at that, now it becomes so much easier, because it's not as daunting. How do we solve dozens of now you only have to, all right, if it's an appointment problem, here's how you fix it. And the really funny thing is, so that's a salon, right? So go to the opposite end of the world. When I started working with, when we started working with Price Waterhouse about 10, 11 years ago, and we were doing this, we, did the exact same exercise. And a big, back then, maybe they're a big 4 accounting firm, that, they had the exact same 5, a scheduling appointment, right? Delay in the work, quality of work, fees, and a lack of professionalism. And, wait a minute, and they almost apply to every business. So you could see, once you figure it out, then the rest of the work. So the next thing, as you know, Dave, is once you figure out where the buckets are, now we got to figure out what systems we can put in place to make us higher level at success and lower level with an appointment mistake or a delay or the price. That we never do work until we've communicated with a client on exactly what the price is. Maybe they have to sign it, maybe they have to confirm it, but we never move forward until we confirm if there's any variation in price. Well, now if you do that, you're going to have a lot less complaints on the back end about I didn't know it was going to be this price.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, John. One of the first exercises we do when we're doing zero risk as a workshop is an exercise where we look at what do we as an organization do wrong that causes these defects. You just brought up a great example in the salon business, and it's lack of communication, right? It's making an assumption that I think you understand the pricing, but maybe I didn't cover clearly enough. And so while some of the defects that we come across are out of our control, there are a lot that are under our control, and it's us actually dropping the balls in some form or fashion that causes the defects to take place. So one of the first exercises we do is we have a conversation about where are those? Where do we kind of self-inflict this pain because we are causing this defect ourselves? That's part of the process. And then we say, okay, what can we do to make this happen less, right? We maybe can't make it go away completely, but how can we make this defect occur less often? How can we put those protocols in place? And you brought up a great example, right? Making sure we don't start that cut until we communicate the price and make sure that person understands price. And, setting expectations is so important to providing a great experience. And sometimes we have to set them and then reset them along the way, but really making sure that we understand where we have those opportunities and that our teams understand what those opportunities look like and they take advantage of those opportunities.
And, it's the same for a B2B, a business to business consulting. You may, get a new project and realize that what the scope of the work is and what they really need are two different things. And you better set those expectations up front with that client saying, we can do that, but it's going to take more than, the amount of days or the amount of months of support or whatever that may lead. And they have the opportunity to say, all right, no, that's our budget, versus saying, all right, if that's what we need, that's what we need, versus on the back end, billing them for days and hours and support and services that wasn't in the initial. And so one of my, the truest quotes is 99.9% of things that go wrong can be traced back to a lack of setting proper expectations, right? Did you set the proper expectations and were they made clear?
Hi, this is Denise Thompson, Managing Partner of the DiJulius Group. We know it can be difficult getting the whole team as excited as you are about customer experience. You talk to them, write newsletters, and it seems to go in one ear and out the other. Sometimes it's the message, sometimes it's the messenger, sometimes it's just a tough crowd. Consider bringing John in to speak live at your next company or association event. He'll have them laughing, crying, cheering, and most importantly, understanding how to become world-class. Visit johndijulius.com for details or to book your date now.
Okay, so Dave, now we've tackled, theoretically, where do we drop the ball the most and what systems and processes can we put into place? And we gave a couple examples. And with AI, right? So you go back to the appointment problem. Well, now they're getting, hopefully, you're getting, whether it be from the dentist or the hair salon or wherever you have an appointment, you're getting text messages, maybe the moment you booked it to confirm that it's on the calendar, you're getting emails. And then, what I like is you get it the day before and all these things help, catch it. If the customer wrote it down for a different day, now, you don't have them showing up as much. So that's how, all right. So what do we do next? Now, as a company, I've found where I drop the ball the most, have improved some systems and processes. So I get it from 8% of the time to 3.5% of the time, which is a win. What do we do next, Dave?
Well, kind of the theme of the day, John, is companies making assumptions. And another place where organizations make a lot of assumptions is that if you as a team member have to deal with an upset customer, you'll know exactly what to do. And again, a lot of companies don't train on that. And we all know that, based on service aptitude, our team members are going to have different reactions to an upset customer if they're not trained on how to handle it. So that's where we go next. We start to talk about the service recovery process itself and making sure that our team members understand the basics, how to deal with that complaint, how to handle that complaint and do it consistently. So it doesn't matter if that complaint comes in at 10 a.m. on a Monday when we have our best person working, or 2 p.m. on a Saturday when our most recently hired person is working, right? That they understand how to handle that complaint. There's a lot of great tools that we help companies create to do just that. And I know we have a couple of examples teed up. And one of my favorites is from Starbucks, where they have their latte method, right? So they make sure that their team members understand to handle that recovery process. And so latte stands for listen completely to the customer, making sure they're hearing the customer out, not making an assumption that they know where this customer is going and cutting them off, that they acknowledge that customer's feelings in the situation, that they take action to resolve that problem. Maybe the most important is the next T in latte, thank the customer for bringing the situation to their attention. That's so important. Each complaint is a gift, as we know. And then encourage the customer to return, encourage to say, you know what, we'll get it right the next time. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. So again, a simple acronym, which makes total sense in their world, latte, is really a starting point of handling that issue, handling that complaint properly and consistently on behalf of the organization.
Yeah, I love that. It's real easy to train. It's like, listen, latte, right? You can remember that and it makes sense. And now I don't handle it differently than you handle it. If we're both customer-facing employees, you may come from a background, you may come from jobs that, you were encouraged to make it right, where I might have come from a job or past jobs where I was taught, don't let the customer take advantage of us. So this really helps to get more consistency. Another great one is Chick-fil-A uses the LAST model, LAST, and they kind of go with nice guys finish last and win. And the last is very similar. The L is listen, and the A is apologize, the S is solve, and the T is thank. So, it's whatever, and then they have some direction underneath them. But anytime someone brings back curly fries that are cold or a drink that wasn't, the order was incomplete, immediately, I don't care if it's your first day or, 10th year, use the last model, make it right. One that a lot of our clients like is least. I like to say, hey, if a customer's upset, if a client's upset, if a guest is upset, I want you to do the least. And that stands for listen, empathize, apologize, solve, and thank. And there is a difference between empathize and apologize, right? I could just say, all right, I'm sorry, Mr. Murray. And you could tell that I don't mean it. I'm rolling my eyes, literally or figuratively, versus, listen, let the customer share what went wrong. Don't interrupt. Don't say, I let them get it off their chest to the point where they start repeating themselves. Then you say, Mr. Murray, I apologize for that. I apologize for the miscommunication. I apologize that your experience wasn't what you're hoping for, but you also, empathize. That's the last thing you needed today. I know you were counting on getting that order. I know you were counting on, getting out of here by, 3:00. So you empathize. So once I think you empathize, they realize you're with them. You're along this journey. And so, listen, empathize, apologize, solve, and thank. We've had a lot of clients come up with their own that are really great, that work for them.
Yeah, another example of that is our friends at Open House out in the Albany, New York area. They came up with heroic. So they took some of these that worked for them, then they added some others into it. So heroic, the H is for here for them, which means actively listen, taking notes. E is empathize and apologize. R is restate for clarification. So showing them that you're actively listening, that you get it, making sure that you do get it, what they're saying. Own it, that you take that ball and you run with it. I is innovate with options, right? So come back with a couple of options that you can offer to that customer. And then the C, the last letter, is confirm and thank. So that, again, thanking for that, for them taking the time to share that they had an issue, that they had a complaint. It's so important.
I'll tell you something, Dave, that I used to recommend to my leaders to do back in the early days, 25 to 30 years ago. That was a huge mistake. I thought it was a great solution. I just said, hey, ask the customer what they'd like. And that ticked off a lot of customers. And, because it was removing any onus on, all right, Mr. Murray, how can we make that right? And I didn't realize, I thought that was great. Let the customer decide. And it was really lazy. And I didn't realize how bad it was until someone said it to me when I, said, hey, I'm not happy with this. And they said, well, what can we do to make it right? And I got insulted because I wasn't looking for anything free. I wasn't looking for, a discount. I just wanted to let you know. So hopefully you can fix this going forward. And if I do business with you again, it's less likely to happen. But the moment that they said to me, well, what can we do to make it right? Kind of, negated everything I just said, almost like they didn't believe the story. And I just wanted a coupon on my drink for free or whatever it may be.
Yeah. It's almost like throwing up the white flag, right? What can I do just to get rid of you right now? Because I don't want to deal with this. Yeah.
Right. So, one thing I want to bring up, Dave, we talked about early in how being zero risk, and with our next section is some of my favorites to this, of winning the customer over for life. Like they just get blown away that A, we care, the company cares, B, they'll make it right. But the other thing is we have been remiss is what it does for employee morale. You think about that. Employees get sick of getting beaten up by the customer. And then they start thinking the customers suck and their company sucks because they got to say, sorry, it's been past the time we give you, 1 week, 2 weeks, 30 days. And I can't refund you. I can't return this. All sales are final, whatever it may be. And, they have to hide behind policy and they go home feeling beaten up. And I love to say, do you ever think the Ritz-Carlton screws up reservations? Yeah, of course. But what's different? That the employee can make it right. They can say, sorry, Mr. Murray, we're fully committed tonight. And for some reason, we don't have your reservations. And I'm so sorry about that. However, we booked and paid for your room across the street at the Marriott or at the Hampton. I mean, now you're more impressed than had we just had your reservations upon check-in. Right. And you're probably hoping that, we're fully committed tomorrow night too. But more importantly is that, Mr. Murray's happy, or he's not, a brand terrorist right now, but the person that's able to do that didn't have to ask permission, goes home feeling good. She was a day maker. She was able to surprise and delight and come to the rescue. And when you're a day maker, the day maker always feels the best. So that's what I love about the zero risk, the impact it has on the employee morale.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it gives employees confidence, right? The confidence that they're not going to get stuck on their heels, that they can be proactive and help that customer. I mean, no one wants to go to work every day and not help customers, right? We all want to help. We all want to have that chance to be a hero or at least help someone through the process. And so if we're arming our team members to do just that, the natural equation is they're going to be happier because of it. And, one point I want to make, John, is that what we're talking about here is not just for your frontline folks. Obviously, it's very important, frontline training. If you have customer-facing team members, that they have to have this training. But this is for our managers as well. And there's some scary statistics out there that remind us that managers need this training just as badly, if not more, right? So what happens when you're not happy? Can I speak to the manager, right? It gets escalated. Well, what's happening in your organization when that happens? And a recent study showed that when issues were escalated to a manager, in this particular study, 35% of the respondents said they were highly satisfied, right? The manager took care of it, solved it to their liking, and they were highly satisfied. That was 35%. But the scary thing was when you add up the amount of customers that were either neither satisfied or dissatisfied, were dissatisfied, or even worse, highly dissatisfied after being escalated to a manager, those numbers came back to 37%, right? So what was happening was the results were actually worse in a lot of cases when it went to a manager than when the manager solved it. So our managers need to be involved in this training as well.
Yeah. They come out and they might be suspicious, and you're 100% right. And that's why I love this quote. While they may complain about what went wrong, they're going to rave about how we'll handle it. And I'm always okay with, listen, I don't want the letter, email, voicemail, whatever the vehicle is that someone was unhappy, but I'm okay with it or I'm better with it when they say, listen, your company dropped the ball, but I got to tell you how well they picked it up. Then I feel great. It's when that second part isn't that I'm really, really disappointed. So we're all gonna drop the ball. That we're human beings, and we live in a world that's moving and so many moving parts. But we got to make sure that we really pick it up and make it right.
Yeah, and to add on to that, confidence for our team members is also giving them tools to help them do just that. We call those service recovery tools, and we've worked with a lot of organizations, particularly in hospitality and others, that have these tools in place. And a great example is the Starbucks card. So if you've ever been to a Starbucks and maybe they were a little behind and it took longer than it should have, they have a tool where they can come across from behind the desk and say, hey, you know what, Mr. DiJulius, sorry, this took longer today than it normally does. We know that we didn't live up to your expectations today. Here's a card, come back, and the next one's on us. And those are great tools to have for your team members to have that confidence. And here's the other thing that I think is pretty fascinating about this, and we've worked on a couple of these, John, behind the scenes, where when you first roll out this idea, a lot of times in senior leadership, there's a little bit of fear, right? That, oh my God, we're giving away free product or whatever it is. And our team members are going to be giving these out like candy and
right. If someone sneezes, they're going to give them a free drink.
Right. And that's always the fear going into it. But the thing that's so fascinating is once an organization roll these out and they start to look at the results quarter into it or 2 quarters into it, they're usually upset that they're not being used enough. They know there's more opportunities to use these than are actually happening. And that's part of the training process, right? We got to build the awareness and train our teams to use these and make sure that they're top of mind. But it's always a fascinating result to me that there's always that fear factor. But once they actually get into using these, they know there's more room to use them than is actually happening.
Well, Dave, it's a paradigm shift because most employees were not taught that way, and they would have gotten in trouble. Their wrists slapped or fired, whatever the stories are, if you don't, make them prove it or they didn't do it. But when you're evolving to a zero risk culture, that is very hard. And you will be more frustrated with employees don't use it and don't, do least or last or latte as much. And that's okay. Understand that. You have to encourage it. And the way you encourage is celebrate. Hey, I want to tell you about what Nicole did yesterday for a client. The client ordered 3 books, and for some reason we had sent the wrong ones, and they called us up to let us know. And so she sent her, next day aired the right ones and told her to keep the original ones, and enjoy them. Right. And you start celebrating those stories about employees that made things right. So Dave, you talked about, all right, that's Starbucks. And again, they're giving away their next drink. How could that apply in the B2B world? And do we always have to be giving away stuff?
Well, that's a great point, John. The answer is no. It doesn't always have to be a freebie. That's where our minds go a lot, a free product. But sometimes we don't have freebies to give. It's not really part of our offering, or maybe we're in a professional services industry and we can't. So a lot of times it's as simple as just acknowledging and making sure, again, that we're thanking for those complaints. So it might be some form of lease, but maybe over an email or a phone call that's made to acknowledge when we did drop the ball, acknowledge that we could have been better. And, a lot of times that's enough. That's more than half the battle, is just making that acknowledgement.
Yeah, I agree. And if I share my displeasure or, hey, I was expecting this on Friday and needed it by Friday, and it's Tuesday, it's a report or whatever it may be from a vendor or whatever, is just saying, hey, I dropped the ball. And my company, we dropped the ball, and it's not what we want to provide. And I give you my word that we're going to reduce this from happening again. And thank you for making us aware of this. Like I don't know if you have this, Dave, but it shows you how many complaints my companies get. We get our fair share. So I have a email signature template that is called service recovery, and then I fill in the blanks. But the basic email template signature is thanking you for taking the time to share this with me. You easily could not have, and I never would have known. But you took the time out of your day to share this, and now you're giving me the opportunity to A, make it right with you, and B, to hopefully figure out a system for reducing that. And I think that's really important, because I think, I know when I complain, I always expect resistance, that the suspicion that I'm, not, telling the truth. And I hate that feeling. So when someone can disarm me. But another thing that I really like is we have to teach our employees that, it's rational to be irrational, and for our customers, and that emotions outpower and manipulate our reasoning, and emotions lead to action. And one of the most confusing and frustrating things for customer-facing employees is the unreasonable way customers can react to something that seems so minor to us. However, when a customer has expectations, not unrealistic expectations, but simple ones about what it will be like to do business with us, and the business fails to deliver, the customer can get emotional. For instance, a customer could be having a stressful day, counting on the one company that they always can trust. Yet this one time, they not only didn't get to escape, but their stress level has increased as a result. So even though it might have been the first time, we've dropped the ball, we messed up with this client, the customer can react emotionally. And it's critical that customer emotions be part of employee service recovery training, especially for dissatisfied customers, because what we might think is a minor thing, we don't know where it's coming from. And once an employee understands it's a good probability of a customer reacting emotionally instead of rationally, then they won't take it personally, are better to make a brilliant comeback.
Yeah, that's so important, right? We as organizations need to almost assume the worst, right? As opposed to thinking it's a minor thing. We have to assume the worst case scenario on the customer's behalf as we're having that communication with them, because that may be the case, right? It reminds me of a personal example with my dry cleaner. And I love them. They do a great job. They provide great service, and they had a delay on one of my suits, and they called me, and they were really concerned about it, almost as if like I needed that suit to get on a plane or that day, and it was going to ruin my whole week. But it didn't, right? It was just a minor inconvenience. It wasn't a big deal, but they were proactive about it, and that made a big difference. And they were ready to take steps if it were the worst case scenario, but in that case, it wasn't, right? So we need to make sure our team members are thinking that way, as opposed to just assuming that it's a minor inconvenience and not a big deal.
Yeah, I love it. And that's where, I like this quote, make it personal, don't take it personally. And I think that's really important when you're fixing it back to the least, right? The empathize and apologize and solve and thank. You got to make that all personal, but just don't take it personal, because it's not you. And I think that's where, we go back to, everything goes back to, as you said, the service aptitude, and building their service aptitude and understanding the day in the life of a customer and the things that they could be going through. And a lot of times, if you really knew what they were going through, you actually wouldn't think they were overreacting. You would think that they were underreacting, because if I was going through that, I would have been even angrier, and it might have nothing to do with our business. It just might have been the tipping point.
Yeah. Empathy, as we've talked about already, is such an important piece of being zero risk, of really handling this well, and your team members handle it well. And that goes back to the day in the life. So, if you have a day in the life video already and you're rolling out some zero risk topics, make sure this is front and center again, right? Show that video again as a reminder. And if you don't have a day in the life, it may be something you want to consider if you're starting to look at some zero risk concepts for your business.
Yeah. So something I've had since we started our businesses is, if it gets to me, it's free. And what that has been is because it's not that I don't want clients, customers, guests to communicate with me, but I know if it hasn't been solved in the first interaction, and no one wants to call the general manager, the president, the owner up. And usually when it gets to that point, they're upset. And a lot of times they might embellish it a little bit. This might be the third or fourth time they've had to say it, and they remember more things. And now they got the general manager, owner, whoever on the phone, and they got to make it worth it. So, I've always said, if it gets to me, it's free. And I've told, our employees that I'm not going to argue with someone, right? Whatever they want. So meaning handle it, take care of it, use the least methodology and make it right and win them over. And so, the best example I have of this is that, this is probably 20 years ago now, but when I was involved in the salons every day, and we had a guest that reached out to me and said, we got color on her suit jacket. For some reason, we didn't have her take off her suit jacket, and we didn't cover up well enough. And she was getting her hair colored, and we spilled color. And so when she told me this, I said, oh, don't worry, we will pay to get that dry cleaned. And she said, can't. Tried that and it won't come out. I said, oh my gosh, well, let's replace the suit. And she goes, they no longer sell it. And I said, well, can I send you a check for the suit? And, she was shocked, and she, said, you don't want to see the suit? I said, no. She goes, you don't want to know how old it is? I said, not necessary. So she said that the suit was, $250. I said, may I send you a check today? And so when I hung up, I sent her a check. I sent her a $50 gift certificate for inconvenience. And then I looked up in her history, just out of curiosity, and she'd been coming to our salon for years. I promise you, I didn't look this up before I solved it, but she'd been coming to our salon for years, and she comes, 7, 8 times a year. But she had never referred anyone. I just remember examining that. And then a year later, I always told the story about how I handled that. And I was very proud of it. Well, someone said, well, is she still a client? And I said, well, that's a great question. So I looked her up again, and to my delight, she had stayed with us. She'd come in another 7 or 8 times in the following 12 months. And so I was really happy until I clicked on her referrals. And to my shock, she had referred over 15 new people in that time. And, I started thinking about $250. What advertisement could get us 15 new clients? So, I thought maybe we should get color on everyone's clothes.
Right. A new marketing campaign.
Yeah. So, it really gives us an opportunity to be a hero. And there's other opportunity. The other one I had is back, to Disney. I waited in line for 45 minutes with my son, Johnny. And when we finally get up to this ride, the cast member measures him, and he was 1/4 of an inch too short, and said, sorry, you can't go on. And, Johnny starts crying, and the cast member bends down and he says, what's your name? And he says, Johnny. He says, well, the next time you come to Disney, you'll probably be tall enough. So he hands him this card that is basically a line jump, right? If you're tall enough, you can jump ahead and be the next one on this ride. And I was blown away. Like, how cool. This isn't the cast member's fault. It was my fault. I knew how tall he should have been, but we were still trying to get by. And this has to happen, several times an hour to the cast member. He has to get frustrated, but he didn't look at it was their fault. He looked at it was their problem. And, for the next 6 months, my son drove me crazy about when can we go back to Disney to get on this ride? So, that's really important is to examine what things we get so caught up. Well, that's not our fault, right? You didn't next air it, and now it's taking longer than you thought. And, that's between you and UPS. Here's the tracking code, so I think that's a huge part of being zero risk.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into an exercise that we conduct during that workshop. We talk about those things. What exists out there that are things that are not our fault, but they become our problem. We have to own it. And there are so many of those with third-party vendors, or something as simple as, what's happening to a customer before they walk into our facility or pick up the phone and call us. There are so many things that can be not our fault, but they need to become our problem. We need to at least provide some support, provide some solutions, because it's part of our experience, whether we know it or not, and whether we like it or not. It really, really is. And so there's a couple of great examples, John, that we talk about and we've helped companies work through. And one of my favorite examples is from the melting pot of, let's say you're out for a business dinner and you're entertaining some really important potential clients, and you just happen to be in a week that you forgot to write the check for the Amex bill, right? It's a little late. And so dinner comes and you're picking it up, and they bring the check envelope, and you put your credit card in. And if your credit card does not work for some reason, what takes place in a typical scenario, right? The server comes over and says, "Oh, Mr. DiJulius, I am sorry, but this credit card did not work," right? Well, that's one of those things that it's not their fault. It's not your fault necessarily either, but it's now their problem. And they don't want to do that to a good customer, right? So they created a tool where they put it back in the check sleeve, take it back to you with the credit card. And it's a little note that says something has gone wrong with your credit card. Unfortunately, when you have a moment, could you please walk over to the host stand so we can take care of this, right? So they take away that potential huge embarrassment, something that may have you never come back again, and they own it and they solve that problem without anyone else having to know.
Yeah, and it goes back to, is it the waitress's fault? Is it the restaurant's fault that your credit card is no, but it's their problem, because if you do, publicly acknowledge, I'm embarrassed, it's probably not the place I want to come back to, I have a fond memory of, versus, like you said, I open it up to sign, I see that little note that asks, and almost, like it's not my fault, but for some reason we're having a problem running this card. Would you mind, providing us with an alternative form of payment? Now I can slip it in and whatever, a different card or cash, and no one knows the better. And, I save face. So I love that, don't win the argument, but lose the customer. And, Dave, we, barely touched the surface on zero risk, but I think we were like an ATM machine today, just throwing out so many great money making ideas. And people don't think about service recovery as money making, but it is. It is money making because you are investing in the relationship with the customer. You're saving the customer and, the longevity of them and the lifetime value of them, and the lifetime value of your employees' morale. I just really love the whole zero risk concept. Think about companies that you're zero risk with, Amazon, whoever that might be, and why you just automatically do business with them without even price shopping them, because that they will take care of it if you ordered the wrong thing, if they drop the ball, all those things. So yeah, like you, I love this topic.
Yeah, it's eye-opening for a lot of organizations. There are so many opportunities here to really wow your customers, or in some cases, just make sure they're having a great experience that they deserve to have, and making sure our team members are aware of those opportunities to deliver just that. It's really a powerful workshop. It's one of my favorite commandments, and you're absolutely right, John. Organizations that go through this, it helps them earn dollars. It's not out there just to protect the organization. It helps them be better.
Right. Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks for a great episode of the Customer Service Revolution. And I look forward to our future ones together.
All right. Thanks for having me, John. It's always a great use of time.
Thank you, revolutionaries. And we will see you next time on the Customer Service Revolution podcast. This is John DiJulius.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. We appreciate all your reviews, so please be sure to give us a thumbs up and let us know what you're enjoying. And be sure to subscribe to hear all episodes on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being part of the Customer Service Revolution.